Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lions Grid. This is the 7th season of the show. First episode. Of course, we are in the preseason, and I am joined today by the Lions Grid founder, Joseph Wilmot, and a first-time contributor, longtime fan, Jeffrey Raymond, joining us today to talk some Lions football. So, gentlemen, well, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate having me on, guys.
Yeah, excited for season 7.
Yeah,
it should be hopefully one of our best season to date. We are switching up the focus a little bit. We've through the 7 seasons, we've sort of tried some different things. We've tried to fill some different roles. We tried a little bit. I know, what was that? Season 5 was probably our most ambitious season, where we were coming out with an episode about fantasy football. We were coming out with episodes about injury reports, roster moves. And, at the end of the day, we're a fan-run show. We're all fans of the Detroit Lions, of the NFL in general. And so we're going to shift things up and try and make our episodes just more focused on being fans of the show and what we think about the team and the direction they're headed. And so, if you still want info about roster moves, changes, injuries, all that, I'm sure they'll come up organically as we're talking about the team. But, we're not Adam Schefter. We're not Ian Rappaport. There's a number of sources out there where you can get that information faster and better than we can provide it. So we're going to just talk about what it's like to be fans of the Lions and their place in the NFL, how they line up in the grid that is the NFL. So without further ado, we have some questions prepared for the team here. And we're going to start talking about some of those things. So, obviously, the way the season ended last year for the Lions, they didn't make the playoffs. But you know what? They stopped the Green Bay Packers from making the playoffs. They went into Lambeau last week of the season, won a game. They won 8 of their last 10 games, finished the season very strong. And I think at that point in time, everyone was really hyped about the Lions. Everyone was feeling really good. They did something they don't usually do by going into Lambeau and getting a win, and people were feeling really good about the Lions. Fast forward to now, we've obviously made it through the preseason. There's been a lot of changes to the roster. We've added new people through the draft, through free agency, and not only Lions fans, but sort of the NFL media is thinking that we have a really good chance of winning the NFC North and being a real contender this season. So, gentlemen, my question to you guys, were you more optimistic at the end of last season, or are you feeling better now that the offseason is complete about how the Lions are going to fare this season? And we'll kick it over to Joe first if you want to go ahead with your answer there.
Well, I think to close out last season, the Detroit Lions, they go into Green Bay, they win the game, even though they didn't make the playoffs. And there was hype about them, that winning 8 out of their last 10 and saying, hey, this team's a team to watch for next year. Despite a lot of changes in the roster, over the offseason, some trades, some elimination of some players and some things like that, DeAndre Swift, Jeff Okudah, some departures. I really think that, upon the release of the schedule, there is now more hype for the Detroit Lions with so many primetime games this season for Detroit.
Well, certainly. Jeffrey, how are you feeling about it? Was it, you think now is more the time, or were you more hyped at the end of last year?
Well, I think with last year we kind of saw them, so I think this year I'm tempering my expectations as far as what they accomplished, but certainly at the end of last year, winning the 8 out of 10 games, no one wanted to play with us at the end of the season, and I guarantee no one wanted to play us in that wild card spot because we were coming on pretty dangerous there towards the end. But kind of like what Joe and you, Kevin, had mentioned, there's been a lot of roster changes. It's not going to be the kind of the same group that's going out there, for better or for worse, I think. But I think they have a chance to meet up to this hype that they're having. Yeah, I definitely think last year showed us something that we have not seen in several years here as Lions fans.
Well, it is funny there that you mentioned tempering expectations, because the next question is about the hype train that is built around this Lions team. Are you buying the hype? Is it something you believe in? I think from my point of view, As you sort of both touched on there, they finished the season strong. I think they did a lot towards telling the narrative that is the same old Lions. They did things that we haven't historically seen them do as a franchise, taking advantage of opportunities they had and getting some really important wins. So, as all that happens, the hype train has sort of built and surged, and we find ourselves coming into this season where it isn't unheard of that people think not only could we win the NFC North, but there's a potential that we could win playoff games and potentially be a representative for the NFC in our first ever Super Bowl. So, are you guys buying into that hype train, or as maybe Jeffrey hinted at, are you sort of trying to temper those expectations? Jeff, we'll kick it over to you.
It is pretty wild. I do kind of pay attention to betting odds in Vegas just to see what the bookies are thinking, and seeing us as odds to win the NFC North makes me a little scared. And in a position I've actually never been as Lions fan. Usually we're bottom, definitely either the bottom or where we might be spicy one year, maybe middle, could make a wild card spot. But this year there's a lot of changes in the NFC North that with Aaron Rodgers leaving and what Chicago's trying to do with Justin Fields, and we don't know how Jordan Love's going to be. There's gonna, I think there's some dust here in the NFC North, and I don't know. I think that we could kind of rise above that dust.
Fantastic, Joe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, as a Lions fan for since 2000, and basically watching them ever since I got into football, this is really the first season that there's been as much hype for the Detroit Lions as there's ever been. We had hype with Matthew Stafford winning that game against the Browns. We had hype with Megatron catching 3 touchdown passes and breaking records on Thanksgiving. But this is the first time that Dan Campbell, we have a solid head coach that everybody's hyped up about. We have a depth of a team, a team that's got some depth. And we got some exciting young rookies. We just had a big draft class. I'm buying into the hype this year because it's not every year that the Detroit Lions are talked about as much as they're talked about right now.
Absolutely. And I think that's, a huge point to bring up. I think one of the reasons why Lions fans do feel guarded a little bit, as Jeffrey mentioned, is that they're, like I said, they did a lot last year to sort of start debunking that same old Lions mythos that they have, right? They started to attack that and take advantage of opportunities, which they haven't really done. But this season seems to be the most significant season, or the highest ceiling that this Lions team has ever seemed to have, at least as far as I can remember in, my 33 years of existence. There hasn't been really talk of them being favored for the NFC North or having a chance to win playoff games. And so to have that level of discussion around this team with a team that traditionally has underperformed or hasn't been able to take advantage of opportunities, I certainly understand there being the feelings for some Lions fans of, hey, you know what? This isn't the same roster that finished last year. I'm going to have to wait and see for this team to come out and prove it. But, I'm definitely on board and really looking forward to seeing what they can do this season. And they have a great chance to sort of show people what they are capable as they go and start the season against Kansas City on September 7th. So it'll be a great way to see how they actually measure up and if we should be riding that hype train or not. But an important part of everyone's breakdown there was some of the roster changes. So our next question here is focused around, who was your favorite addition of this offseason? And on the other side of that coin, which player leaving was sort of your least favorite? Who did you hate to see the Lions not bring back this season? And Joe, we'll start off with you here with your favorite addition and your least favorite subtraction from the team.
I'd have to go with my favorite addition would be Emmanuel Mosley. He's got a good name. He's a cornerback. And the only reason I choose the cornerback position is because Jeff Okudah was a good cornerback that we had coming on last year that was making strides to be a perennial lockdown corner. And he got traded, so we had to replace that. And so I'd have to go with Emmanuel Mosley. The other one is that Johnson fellow from Philadelphia. Those are two guys that are going to come in and fill some voids that we have at the cornerback position. So those are the two guys that I'm happy to see on the squad this year. They should make a difference.
Fantastic. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts about this offseason?
So I'll start out with my least favorite kind of departure, and that was kind of towards the beginning of the offseason, and that was Jamal Williams. He just even like seeing him through Hard Knocks, seeing him interviews and everything while he was with the Lions organization, you can tell he was he was a piece of that heart of that team there. He definitely brought the juice. He brought the anime, which is great.
The swagikaze of the city hidden in the den, yeah.
Yeah, just something about him and that team just kind of made it so, like, everybody liked them. I know there was some issues with, like, his agent and contract shopping around that ended up being so he's not on the team. So I'm a little disappointed about that because I really liked him as a player. As far as my favorite addition, I think our like second, third round and end of the first round draft picks that we got there. I think we got a lot of depth there and some people we can plug in starter situations or just on downs that we could just be like, hey, go get the quarterback, or hey, make coverage here. And I'm excited about those young guys.
Fantastic. And we just want to say, hey, Bush18, we see your message there in Twitch. Thank you for joining us here. And hopefully you're enjoying so far what we're putting forward. But I think I'm in that same boat with you, Jeff, in terms of my least favorite departure was definitely seeing Jamal Williams, just because he to your point, he's one of those guys that definitely, as Dan Campbell likes to say, had that dog in him. And sort of letting him go when he seemed like such a great culture fit and helping to build that. And he had obviously last year with the number of touchdowns he was able to get, had an incredible amount of production. Now, I think obviously it's kind of irresponsible to think that he could sort of reproduce at that same level this season. The last season was a career year for him, but certainly I think a guy who I'm excited to see what he does down in New Orleans. And honestly, if they had re-signed him, it would have been the first Lions jersey I would have purchased since Joey Harrington when he was drafted. So that was the last Lions jersey I owned, and then at that point I swore off it. But I would have gotten the Jamal Williams jersey. And then my favorite addition this year, you don't traditionally spend a first-round pick on a running back, but I really like Jahmyr Gibbs. I did want to see, in fairness, I will admit during the draft, I would have loved to see them take another edge rusher to complement Aiden Hutchinson. But especially with JMO being out the first 6 weeks of this season, I think getting a running back that can not only run the ball but contribute quite significantly in the passing game, I like that pick a lot. They may have reached a bit taking him in the first round to do it, but at the same time, if he is, the player that I think he's as talented as they thought he was, and if he is a good fit for the team, you got to take your guy. I'd rather you have use the resources to get the people and players you want. So I'm excited to see what his season sort of is going to be, what the cap for his season is going to be, because I think he could be a really new electrifying part of the offense. And so speaking of the offense, and we talked a little bit about the defense there, which of the position groups this season are you guys the most excited about watching? And which, again, the other side of that coin, which position groups has you the most worried headed here into the season? Jeff, we'll start off with you here.
All right. So my group that I'm most excited about, and excited but also intrigued by, is our wide receiver group. By the end of last year, we were like almost a top 5 offense. But we made some mix-ups in our wide receiver room. Like, we have some different weapons around Goff. We did bring back Marvin Jones Jr., and he'll be a good veteran presence. But we also JMO is going to be suspended for some of the years. So, Amon St. Brown, he's a great receiver, but we can't rely solely on him to kind of get that production that we were getting. We were getting the run game going, we were getting the pass game going. Play action was working really great for Jared Goff, something that he excels at, and they definitely added that aspect in the offense in there, and they're running it really well. So I'm intrigued to see how this new group was going to mesh and see if we can get that production kind of back where it is. As far as concerns go, I'm kind of cheating a little. Instead of saying a position group, I'm going to say the run stopping scheme is my most concern here. We added some people, in the back end and secondary and stuff to help the pass game, but we were atrocious last year in the run game, especially in our early season kind of slide when we weren't so great and we were trying to figure things out. But we have to be able to stop the run. All the good teams are able to stop the run, especially in the NFC North, where I think that we're going to be seeing some heavy run games going on. But those are kind of my two positions that I was kind of keep an eye on.
Very nice. Joe, what are your thoughts about the position groups, and who do you have your eye on, and who's giving you sleepless nights?
I'm looking forward to watching the linebacker play this year. Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, and Malcolm Rodriguez. Those three linebackers should be the starting three in whatever roles they can play, and if we go with a 4-3 defense, then making those three the 4-4, then perhaps we could get the Okwara brothers in there. I think we only have one left on the team. I'm not sure if the other one's on the team still, but there's always that Josh Woods that was on the team last year, and Derek. So, some players that weren't really notable, but they made significant contributions to the team. And so I'm excited to see what they do at the linebacker, what kind of defense we come out in, if it's a 4-4 or a 4-3. You got to think, if we got two on the edge, one on the left and on the right, and two in the back, that's 4-4. That's 3-4-4. So, one safety, two corners or whatever. And we got good position play by these. But what really gets me concerned on defense, and defense is my one that I'm most concerned with, because I think we'll be able to put up some points, but you got to be able to stop the run. So I agree with Jeff right there. You got to have defensive tackles in there that are going to shut down the run.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point, and I would choose them as my position group too, to be most concerned with the run stopping. But just to add another potential thing out there, another nugget for people to be interested in, also the kicking game. We're going with a new kicker this year. I think there's two they have currently in camp, sort of fighting for that starting position. They let Badgley go, who finished out the season for us as our main kicker. So that's something that I'm certainly going to keep an eye on, because I think it's something of that good teams sort of, you don't notice it, right? When the special teams is working and doing their job, they're kicking the extra points, they're getting the field goals when they need to, and it's really sort of a sort of unsung part of the team, unless it's that last second field goal and you're lining up and you're like kicking a 60-yard bomb. You're not really considered the stars of the show. So that's, I think, the position group that I'm most concerned about, just because we're going with somebody new, and I really have no idea what sort of expectations to have for them here. It'll be nice to see tonight against the Giants how they do. And then the position group that has me the most excited, I'm going to go to the running back room. I'm excited to see, again, I already said Jamar Gibbs was sort of my favorite addition, but also David Montgomery, bringing him in. I know they've also been playing around here. Justin Jackson, they added him to the retirement list, so I'm not sure if he's retiring and hanging it up, or what's going on there. But I know they just signed Benny Snell and some other big running backs, as they're trying to, find a guy to really be that sort of, I think, that short yardage specialist, where Jamal Williams really was able to get a lot of those touchdowns in the, inside the red zone there, fighting for those tough yards. So I think that's what I'm really excited to see, is how Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery go, and then who's going to be that back that sort of who's going to take on the responsibility of those short yardage runs that Jamal Williams really had a lot of success with. Because as a fantasy football owner, I would love to have 10 touchdowns from a running back in a season. So I'd love to know who to pick up as we get ready to kick off the fantasy football year. So with all that, talking about the roster and things like that, I guess the next place to look is the season itself. Obviously, we were looking past the preseason at that point, and starting to take a look at the Lions' schedule now. The Lions, according to Pro Football Focus, have the 16th easiest schedule. So they're ranked number 16, pretty middle of the pack. They're projected to have 8.2 wins. Their easiest game is allegedly against week 3 against the Falcons, and their hardest game is supposed to be week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs, which makes sense. The Chiefs, they're coming off a Super Bowl victory and are pretty good. The Lions also are one of the teams that doesn't have to travel too far. They're down there towards the bottom of the list in terms of the amount of travel time they have this season. So they're going to be able to be a little bit more rested than some of the other teams, like the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Dolphins. A lot of the West Coast teams are doing a ton of traveling, but not so much for the Lions. Vikings, Bears, or Packers, all of them are down towards the bottom of the list. So you have a combination of a sort of middle-of-the-road difficulty schedule. We've already talked about some of the things that have happened in the NFC North that certainly give them an opportunity to compete for that division. They don't have to travel too much. With all of those things in mind, what sort of record do you think the Lions are going to have at the end of the year? And sort of, do you have them? What sort of expectations are you guys sort of placing on them? Do you think they're going to win the NFC North? Do you think they're going to make a wild card? How do you sort of see the season playing out for them? And Jeff, we'll kick it over to you to see what you're going to project the Lions after the season.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be vying for one, the division at the end of the year, and two, probably one of the wild card playoff spots, I would say. I think that the NFC North is going to be. I think there's going to be some cannibalism going on there, especially with there's going to be some new stuff. New stuff. Green Bay's coming out. We don't know how they're going to look. We don't know how the Justin Fields experiment's going to look when all their roster changes there. Minnesota is an interesting team to say the least. they have the worst defense ever, yet they win all these games by it. But I kind of have them towards getting like 11 and 12 wins this year, and fighting for that one of the lower playoff spots.
Very nice. And to your point, I think one of the interesting things to note too is that when it comes to the Vikings, we play them, of course, as a division rival twice in the season. Both of those games are happening December and January. So I think it's the last week of the year we're playing them at home, and then just before Christmas we're going to Minnesota. So two very impactful games late against a team that we could be competing against for that NFC North title. So Joe, with that in mind, how do you see the Lions? What sort of record are you projecting them to get, and what are your sort of expectations for the playoffs for them?
Well, just a month ago, they were projected to win 11 games. So I looked at the Vegas odds, and I see 11 games, and I'm like, you know what? They may not have the exact games that they're going to win correct as far as like against what team, but I think going with 11 wins is a safe bet. And I think they're going to win the NFC North. And what would make the season for me is a home field playoff game. So get 11 wins, win the NFC North, 11 or more wins, and have a home playoff game. And that's a good season for me.
Yeah, that would be a fantastic season. And I think one that would definitely put them in a position to compete in the postseason, which would be great for us. I think looking at their schedule, to me, obviously some of the games that give me sort of the most pause in terms of who they're playing, week 1 against the Chiefs, I think that's going to be one of their harder games. The game against Seattle, that's also going to be challenging, but thankfully that game is being played here in Detroit, so that's a plus there. They also take on the Ravens and the Chargers. And then outside of that, I mean, the rest of the games are definitely games where I think they have an opportunity to get a win. A big part of every season is going to be how well they do against the NFC North. Again, they play each one of those teams twice. So they play the Packers twice, they play the Bears twice, and they play the Vikings twice. Last season, they had a winning record against the NFC North. And so I think that's going to be very important again this year. If they can go in, traditionally they do fairly well at home against the different teams. It's usually the away games where they tend to struggle, especially against the Packers. But that game this year is earlier in the year. It's in September and not in the dead of winter. So that should help them. They're not going to have to deal with the cold Lambeau weather. And so really, I think, 12 wins is definitely not out of the question, because I think for most of these games this season, unless some big injuries happen, I think you're going to see the Lions be favored heading into most of these matchups. So definitely, I think for me, they should definitely win the NFC North. This is probably their best opportunity to do so. But I certainly recognize one of the teams that may stand in their way are those Minnesota Vikings, and having those 2 games late, those are going to be really key matchups that we're going to get to enjoy towards the end of the season. So looking forward to that. With that in mind, obviously we have, I talked a little bit there about some of the matchups that are coming the Lions' way. Are there any games on the schedule that you guys are particularly interested in and excited for, and happy that you get to see this season? Jeff, what games caught your eye?
I have 2.
Am I back
definitely,
on?
I think.
Oh yeah, you're here, Joe.
We see ya. I think my favorite.
I lost connection.
Oh, no worries. Welcome back.
No worries. Yeah. Definitely the first game. I want to see, all the hype's going on. Hype train's here. We ended last year as world beaters. Well, I mean, potentially world beaters. We made playoffs, but we were pretty spicy at the end. I want to see us come out there and play the Super Bowl chance. To be the best, you got to beat the best, and I want to see, it's opening week. There's a lot of optimism there. I just want us to go out there and give our best performance, give them a good punch there. Even if we don't win, I know Andy Reid is 24-7, come off of bye weeks, and this is the biggest bye week you could possibly have. But I just want to see, since Dan Campbell came here, he's been throwing the kitchen sink at whatever opponent that come across when their roster was bad, when their roster was good. So I'm just excited to see what we have against the best. And then just real quick, my second one is, it's a weird one, the Lions versus the Falcons, just because both those teams, when they play together, produce the most absurd football games I've ever watched. Just weird shenanigans, all kinds of things. So that's just going to be just a weird game to watch, as it always is. So those are kind of my 2 that I've been keeping an eye on.
All right, Kevin, I can hear you now. I'm back on now. I can say my team. You ready?
Yeah. What games do you have your eye on, Joe?
Raiders versus Detroit at Detroit, Monday Night Football on October 30th. And I think that'll be an exciting game. And then I have Green Bay at Detroit on Thanksgiving. So those will be 2 awesome games. Green Bay and Lions, classic rivalry on Thanksgiving, 90th season. It'll be nice.
Certainly looking forward to that. It'll make some great Thanksgiving Day entertainment. And Joe, question for you about the Raiders Lions game. Do you think Jimmy Garoppolo will still be behind center for the Raiders come that week, or do you think he's been injury prone? And it's the Raiders themselves are certainly a team not unfamiliar with a quarterback carousel. So do you think Jimmy G will be under center for the Raiders when they come to Detroit?
Well, he's going to have to be if they want a chance at winning that game, because Jimmy Garoppolo's got experience, and I don't know who else they got as Raiders backup. So, I mean, I would hope that if they want to compete against Detroit in that game, that they have a quarterback that's got some experience. But I would think that he would try to stay healthy throughout the season and be able to play that game and give them a good chance to win.
Yeah, certainly. I hope so too. He's a guy who hasn't had much luck. He's in terms of being able to make it through full season. So it'd be nice to see him, as he's now moved on from the 49ers to the Raiders, actually be able to stay healthy and contribute to that team. And of course, reuniting with Josh McDaniels out there may be a good chance for him to be successful. And he has Devontae Adams, who is a former Packers fan. Certainly a soft spot in my heart for him. And then Jeff, to your point, that Falcons-Lions game also will be featuring the two best rookie running backs in the league. Of course, Gibbs for the Lions, and then Bijan for the the Falcons. So that'll be exciting to see those two go head to head. And then, of course, who doesn't want to see Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, how the Lions can line up against them? I will say, last season, it took the Chiefs a little while to figure out their offense because obviously they traded away Tyreek Hill. And that sort of changed their wide receiver core pretty significantly. They don't still to this day really have a number one wide receiver. Everything pretty much goes through Travis Kelce. So it's going to be, they also have a change in offensive coordinator this year. So it's going to be interesting. I think, playing them, to your point, Andy Reid is very good coming in and is certainly going to have his team prepared. But maybe it's early enough in the season where that might be they haven't quite got that offense figured out, and could be a really good chance for us to steal a game there from Kansas City, which is not an easy place to go to get a win. So looking forward to that game as well. All right. And so, we've talked about which games excite us. We've talked about our sort of expectations about what we think they can achieve. What needs to happen this season for you to consider it a success for the Lions? Is it they have to win the NFC North? Is it they have to win a playoff game, whether that be a wild card or as the home team as a division winner? Sort of what do you think needs to occur for you to say, okay, gold star, this was a successful season? Joe, we'll kick it over to you first with what you think the Lions need to achieve this year.
This year, the Detroit Lions need to win the NFC North, 11 or more wins. They need to get home field advantage in the playoffs for at least one game, and then they need to win that game. They need to play shutdown defense, and they need to look like a good football team to start changing the perception of the Detroit Lions for NFL fans around the league.
Fantastic. Jeff, what are your thoughts? What do you
for me, I think what would be considered success just for me personally, I think, is getting to that 11 wins. I think the division is going to be it's going to be neck and neck. I think we could still win it, but for me, getting to the playoffs, just having a playoff spot when the end of the season rolls around, we're starting postseason, the Detroit Lions are there. For me, that would be the ultimate. Whether it's a wild card spot, it would be great to have that home field playoff game. I think that would be really awesome. But just us getting there, I think would, for me, I don't know. It would make me feel good about this regime that they started out very talent poor. They've done it their way. They've got their players, and now they're starting to kind of break that ceiling of those upper echelon teams that we have.
Yeah. So for you, it doesn't matter the outcome of that game necessarily. They just need to either make the playoffs, either as the wild card or the NFC North team.
Yes.
Gotcha. I think, I think to be a success, you're absolutely right. I think they need to make the playoffs, and I'm not real picky about how they do that, whether that be as the NFC North champion or as the wild card berth. I think my sort of stretch goal, my plus goal for success would be getting that playoff win, just because I think that would go really far towards, as Joe said, establishing them as being a real contender in the league. I think that sort of perception is there for the league, where teams are starting to look at the Lions as being a very serious organization, and that free agents are starting to take seriously as a potential destination. But I think if they could secure a playoff win, that would really go even further, so that next year that Brad Holmes and his team, as they're trying to bring in free agents, maybe if they need to add another edge rusher or something like that to help another wide receiver, whatever the case may be, to really help take this team over the edge, if they could get a playoff win, having that under their belt, I think would obviously be that. I think that would be the signal to the NFL that, hey, we need to watch out for these guys, and that their window for competing for a Super Bowl is officially open. I think until they get a playoff win, that isn't necessarily the case. But at the same time, I don't think the season's a wash if they make the playoffs and they don't win. I think I would be most disappointed, though, if they did win the NFC North and had home field advantage and they lost that playoff game. I think that would be the most disappointing, as opposed to if they made it as a wild card team and sort of lost in a scrappy game. That wouldn't upset me as much as being that road team with a chance to win. Whereas if they do get that home game themselves, would certainly love to see them win that, and them losing it would be kind of it wouldn't leave like a terrible taste in the mouth, but it wouldn't be a good mouthfeel. It wouldn't be great. So, we talked a little bit here about their chances of winning the NFC North, and we talked about the fact that they play the Vikings twice towards the end of the season. Who do you guys think is the biggest threat in the NFC North to the Lions? Jeff, we'll kick it over to you first.
I think their biggest threat is the Vikings. I think we know more about them than the new look Packers and the kind of new look Bears. What we do know about the Vikings is, as far as last year, atrocious defense, but their offense can keep them in games.
Mm-hmm.
I think I haven't been following the Vikings pickups on defense as closely this offseason, but I think just based on last season and how their offense is working, I think we're going to have two high-powered offenses where both teams are actually trying to figure out their defenses, and I think that's going to be kind of the key tipping point between us two. So, yeah, Vikings, Lions, I think. Vikings are my biggest threat, I'd say.
All right, Joe, who do you think have as the biggest threat?
I can't remember if the Vikings lost Justin Jefferson or not, but I don't know if they have Dalvin Cook either. But those are two players that I think that are no longer with Minnesota. Am I right on that, Kevin? Do you know?
Justin Jefferson is still there. Dalvin Cook did leave, and Adam Thielen also left. So you have Justin Jefferson as the number one receiver, and they did add in the rookie Addison from USC. But Jefferson no longer has Thielen running with him, who he's had in past seasons.
So they got a rookie wide receiver replacing Thielen and a new running back. Dalvin Cook was one of the best running backs in the league. And, he could really move the ball for Minnesota. I'm not so sure how they're going to do that this year. But I really think the NFC North is wide open as far as, Chicago, Green Bay, or Minnesota competing with Detroit for number one. I really think it's going to be like an even-keeled battle between between all four teams in the NFC North. So, but if I had to choose one, I'd go with Minnesota.
Go with Minnesota as well. That's a very fair point, Joe. I think I'm in that same boat with it being actually a pretty open race between the different teams. I think the Lions should be the favored team, but I don't think it's favored to the point where favored like the Patriots typically are in the AFC East. During the Tom Brady era, I don't think it's a slam dunk that the Lions get it done here, but I think they are the best roster currently. I think they are very similar to the Vikings, but I think their defense is in better shape. As Jeff mentioned, I think that'll help determine the outcome there between them. But certainly the Bears added quite a few players in this offseason to their offensive line, to their defense that could make them better. And, will be another year in here for Justin Fields to see what he can do. There's obviously question marks around Jordan Love and what he can do with the Packers, but their defense is still pretty outstanding. Jalen Reed is apparently impressing and has joined that Packers receiving corps. It was hilarious to see the Packers spend draft capital early in the draft to bring in talent to help support the quarterback after they let Aaron Rodgers go. As a Packers fan, I think that's probably my biggest hang up is the fact they've had two Hall of Fame quarterbacks back to back, and the way they've ended their careers with the team have been horribly managed. So I think it's unrealistic for the Packers and Packers fans to hope that Jordan Love is going to come through and be a third Hall of Fame caliber quarterback in a row. So, I think it's really hard to choose between those three teams because I think all four of them could win the NFC North. I like the Lions to win it, but I'm going to go with Chicago being their biggest threat to them, and not necessarily because I think the Lions line up rather well against the Bears. They handled Justin Fields rather well last season, but I think that the Bears may be able to beat other teams and present a challenge that way, kind of like the Lions split last year with the Vikings in the season series, but ended up winning the NFC North anyways just because they beat everybody else. Could be something similar for the Bears with all the additions they've had. but I think the Lions actually match up rather well against them. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. And then last question here. Well, actually, I'll throw a curveball in here just to catch you guys off guard. We talked about running backs, Delvin Cook in particular. We've talked about the rookie running backs. One of the things that seems to be a trend this offseason, you have Shaquan Barkley, you have Brandon Jacobs, all of these top-tier running backs sort of getting undervalued and not getting contract extensions. What do you guys think about that? Do you think how do you see the NFL going? Do you think this is going to continue to be the trend where running backs continue to be a nice to have, and the elite running backs aren't going to be able to get the same contracts they used to get because they're not valued as much by teams? Or do you think the NFL will sort of wake up at some point and sort of head back in that direction where you have franchise running backs? Or do you think that day is sort of long gone where the running back by committee doing it with cheap young guys is the way that teams will try to get it done? Joe, I'll kick it over to you for your thoughts.
Well, I think the days of franchise running backs are over with. If we had franchise running backs, we still have Swift, we still have Jamal Williams. Williams broke a franchise record. Swift was just starting to turn the corner and become a productive running back. The way I see it, if you have anywhere from 2 to 3 good seasons with a football team, and it's on one football team, and you're a running back, I think that's the perennial spotlight of your career in this day and age. 3 good years, one running back, one football team. I think that's the most you can really get out of a running back. So I think the franchise days of running backs are over with.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I think unless you have someone that's like a generational running back talent, like possibly Bijan Robinson, I don't want to speak too soon, but like say another type of Adrian Peterson comes up, or somebody who's just an absolute like a game destroyer, then I could see like a bell cow running back. But I think a lot of teams have moved over to this running back by committee, or having like change of pace backs, have backs who are more technically sound as far as blocking and catching passes versus the big hog mollies who want to just get a few yards going between some tackles there. So I think the age of the big bell cow running back's over. I think we've seen a lot through our years, but I think definitely by committee.
Yeah, I think we started to see that transition. Really, I think Le'Veon Bell was probably the first big name running back where, with when things went south with him and the Steelers, I think that was sort of the heralding of this new age where, I think you look at running backs around the league and you used to think that, hey, that guy is going to be there for forever and is going to be the anchor of sort of their offense. And that it just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So, it's definitely going to be interesting to see, if that continues to be the trend. To your point, one guy who I'm surprised hasn't gotten paid is Austin Eckler for the Chargers, just because not only does he run the ball, but he's also quite involved in their passing game as well. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see how the running backs in the NFL approach that, because I think there are some of them, and hopefully Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson are both two of those guys who add that extra element, that extra value in the passing game that your traditional running back doesn't necessarily always do. I mean, most running backs can catch the ball, but I think Austin Eckler is an elite threat in the passing game. So if young running backs continue to do that, it'll be interesting to see if they don't try and carve out like a new position for themselves that they can be valued appropriately. It would all be on the business side of things, but I think that's kind of interesting to watch as you look at these contract negotiations continue to go on, where your traditional, rushing leaders outside of King Henry down there in Tennessee haven't seemed to be to getting the contracts and the respect that they've traditionally been paid. So, all right, well. We have just 2 more questions here. This last one is just who do you think is going to be representing the team, or which 2 teams do you think will be in the Super Bowl this year? Who are your preseason picks here for the Super Bowl? I'll go first. And my 2 teams that I'm going to choose, I am going to go with for the NFC, I'm going the Eagles. AKA the Georgia Bulldogs of the NFL on defense. I think that they, I like what they added in the draft. I think they are a team to watch out for, and the way they played last year, until another team comes and knocks them off, I just think they're going to be the best team in the NFC. The AFC is certainly a little more interesting. Of course, the Chiefs are a fantastic team. They're trying to defend their Super Bowl. But I'm going to go, even though he's got the hamstring injury at the moment, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I see a Bengals-Eagles Super Bowl. So those are my two picks. Jeff, who do you got?
For the NFC, I agree with you. I think Philly is my choice until another team kind of comes out and kind of knocks them off. I would have liked to have seen in that last playoff San Francisco at full strength instead of having to go to their third, fourth string quarterback, because San Francisco is a beast when they're going. But I think as of right now, we don't know how Brock Purdy is going to come back after his injury. It's a pretty significant injury, especially for quarterbacks in the arm there. So we'll see kind of how their quarterback play is. But I think if their quarterback play is elite, I think they'll be up there. But as of right now, I think Philly is going to come out of the NFC. For the AFC, you're right. This is quite the field there. There's a lot of good teams here, but I do think I'm kind of giving the edge to Kansas City this year. I would have given it to Cincinnati, but the hamstring injury scares me, so that's why I'm putting Kansas City up.
You're going for the rematch then between the Chiefs and the Eagles. Very nice. I did hear something interesting today on the ticket. It's funny you mentioned San Francisco. Did you know that had they beat the Eagles, their plan was to start Phillip Rivers in the Super Bowl against Kansas City?
What? Just sign him for a couple weeks.
He was their emergency quarterback for the Super Bowl. They were going to bring in Phillip Rivers.
I would have loved to see Phillip Rivers thrown into the Super Bowl. That would have been awesome.
2 weeks to prepare, and that would have been their guy under center because they just didn't have anybody else. Joe, who are your Super Bowl picks?
Well, there's 4 teams that I'm looking at for both sides, NFC and AFC. In the AFC, it's Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, or Los Angeles Chargers. In the NFC, it's Dallas, Philadelphia, Los Angeles Rams, or Detroit. And I'm going with Kansas City versus Detroit in the Super Bowl. It's the 90th season. I'm riding the hype train. I'm going for Detroit versus Kansas City. Classic battle, red versus blue. Let's get it going on here in Detroit.
I like it. I like that pick. And it'll be interesting to see, too. I think it provides that'd be a great storyline because obviously they're playing here the first week of the season. So to see how things have changed and how the two teams measure up from the first week to the Super Bowl, that'd be a really cool way to end the season. So certainly wouldn't mind that. And so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then obviously we've talked a lot about the league in general. And as we wrap up the show here, the only question left is we haven't spent too much time talking about today's game because it's a preseason game. It's against the Giants. Obviously, it's the first one of the year, so the starters aren't going to be in too much. But I guess we'll just go around here and do a quick round robin of who you got winning tonight's game against the Giants. So, Jeffrey, you want to kick it off with your pick?
Well, I'm always going to pick for preseason the Lions every time.
Always.
What I'm interested, though, the thing I want to be interested most about is Jameson Williams reps. I want to see. I assume they're going to try to make him go 100% because he's going to be suspended for a good portion of the year. So just kind of get him at full speed, get him on the offense, trying to get him, running the routes and running the play designs and all that kind of stuff before he's shelved. And then he has to come back. So I think I'm going to be really interested to see how hard he goes really tonight.
Yeah, that was another hot topic on the ticket today. They were talking very much about, and people were split about whether they wanted to see him get a larger workload or if they wanted to see him sort of be treated like a starter. And it seemed to be like, there being a range of people wanting to see him sort of prove all of the expectations that are around him because he's, only played in 6 games. He has 1 reception on 9 targets. So we haven't really seen too much of him yet in the NFL. So some people want that reassurance and see him come out here and perform well in the preseason, especially as you mentioned, since he's missing those 6 games. And he can't practice during that time either. So these are really important reps for him. And then there are other people who are like, no, he'll be fine. We don't want him to get hurt. We don't want anything to impact, his explosiveness or anything like that. So he should be sort of kept on a play counter. But certainly something I definitely will be keeping an eye on when he's on the field as well, because certainly I think there's a lot of intrigue around there, especially with them moving up to take him, and they could have taken Jordan Davis, who had a big impact for the Eagles. And as both you, Joe, and myself mentioned, one of the big Achilles heels for the Lions has been run stopping, and there's no denying that Jordan Davis, having him in a Lions uniform, would make our run defense better. So, Joe, who do you have in tonight's game against the Giants?
Well, I think Detroit's going to run a lot of different schemes. They're going to test out a bunch of different game plans and a bunch of different plays. So I don't really see them being win-loss competitive in this game. So I'm choosing the Giants to win this game. But look for a lot of different types of players and a lot of different personnel for Detroit as they try to figure out what type of team they have.
I like it. I'm going to be a little sassy and a little fan-like. I'll admit I don't know too much about the backup players for the Giants, but my feeling about them is they probably suck because the Giants in general suck. So I think the Lions should be able to get the win here. I think they've been we certainly know they have quite a bit of depth. I'm excited to see what the young players bring to the table, but I don't hear anyone talking about the exciting depth that the New York Giants have. And I know that Danny Dimes has been sort of inconsistent so far in preseason. After the first week of after the first day of joint practices, people were saying that he looked awful. He came out and played better the next day, but I just think the Giants are kind of ass. So I'm going with the Lions in this game.
They did have some video from the joint practice, and Penei Sewell was going up against Kayvon Thibodeau for some quarterback rushing drills, and Penei Sewell was handling him pretty well in that video.
I like that. So, I mean, if it was the starters, I would still go with the Lions playing the full game. I would still go with the Lions over the Giants because, again, I think the Lions are the better team. But especially when and maybe it's just ignorance on my part, not being familiar with all of the great hidden talent that's on the Giants team. But I think they are just overall in a worse spot as a franchise and are really looking to build that thing back up. So I'm going with the Lions. I think they're the more talented team and should hopefully that will translate to a victory on the field. And we'll get to see some exciting plays from the new younger guys that they've added to the team. All right, gentlemen. Well, we have covered quite a few topics, ran the gambit, so to speak. Want to thank everybody who tuned in. I know we've had some people popping in and out throughout the show. So if you did enjoy today's show, make sure you go ahead and like or subscribe on whichever platform you're watching on. We do multi-stream this to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. So we're casting a wide net. So wherever you happen to be watching from, make sure you follow the Lions Grid for upcoming episodes. This has been so we have a question here. What channel is the game going to be on? It's going to be on Fox 2, I believe. So if you have just your local, Fox 2 Detroit is the primary broadcaster. So whatever your local Fox affiliate is, that's the channel you want to tune in for the game. I know some games may be on the NFL Network at some point this preseason, because last night they had the Texans and the Patriots and the Vikings and the Seahawks. Those were both on the NFL Network, and I know the Packers are on the NFL Network today. So if it's not Fox, check for this week. It is Fox, but if you're ever looking for the game and it's not on Fox, check the NFL Network here for preseason. You're very welcome. Tune in next week. We'll be doing an episode next week, doing our sort of preseason 2. The Lions next week will be taking on who are they playing?
Jacksonville.
The Jaguars. Ooh, in Jacksonville too. And that is the it's another home game. Oh yeah, it's Carolina. They go on the road. So we'll be at home on Saturday against the Jaguars. So we will do another episode before that and sort of talk about what comes here in this first preseason game, and take a look at that matchup against Trevor Lawrence, who I have heard some people say is a dark horse for the MVP. So we'll have to get your guys' opinions on that. I know that Jacksonville team is they are a team I considered when I was looking at the AFC for a potential Super Bowl team. They could be sneaky, but we'll talk more about that next week. Joe, Jeff, thank you both for joining me today, and everybody for watching. We'll go ahead and sign off for now, and we'll catch you during the next episode. Go Lions, and have a fantastic evening, everyone.